In 1983, a fuel economy engineer at a truck maker's proving grounds in Indiana noticed something strange in the winter test data. One of the veteran test drivers, a man who had run the Dakotas for 20 years before taking the job, was getting better fuel numbers and faster warm-ups than every other driver in the fleet. Same truck, same route, same diesel. The engineer walked out to the yard to look at the man's tractor and found a sheet of cardboard bungeed across the front of the grille. It looked like trash. It looked like something the wind blew in. The engineer almost pulled it off. Instead, he went back inside and ran the numbers, and the numbers said the old driver was right and the engineering department was late to the party. This video is about 15 of those tricks, the kind that make a new driver laugh out loud right up until somebody with a degree runs the numbers and goes quiet. None of them were ever taught in a school. They were paid for with blown engines, frozen brakes, and white knuckle nights on Donner Pass, and they were collected at 3 in the morning on the shoulder of an interstate in Wyoming with a dead truck and nobody coming. Your father did some of these. Your grandfather did a few of them with a grain truck on a gravel road. We start at number 15, and we finish with the one thing that holds all the others together. Number 15, thumping the tires with a club. You have seen it at every truck stop in America. A driver walking around his rig at dawn, whacking each tire with a wooden bat or a length of pipe, and you think, what can that possibly tell him? It tells him almost everything. A tire is a drum head. Strike a drum head that is stretched tight and it rings back at you with a high live note. Strike one that is slack and you get a dead thud. Air pressure is tension, and tension changes the pitch of a struck object, the same physics that lets a piano tuner work by ear. On a big truck, the drive axles carry dual tires side by side, and here is the problem. If the inside tire goes flat, the outside tire holds the pair up, and everything looks normal to the eye. The flat one hides in there, flexing and overheating, until it catches fire or comes apart at 70 miles an hour and throws 100 pounds of steel-belted rubber across 3 lanes. Your eye cannot catch it. A $4 wooden club can. The old drivers could tell you within a few pounds of pressure just from the note. The tire gauge people hated them. Number 14, cardboard over the grill in winter. This is the one from the proving grounds, and it sounds like the dumbest thing on this list. Blocking your own radiator? The radiator exists to cool the engine. Why would you fight it? Because a working diesel has a problem nobody warned you about. It can run too cold. Diesels are efficient, and efficient means they waste less energy as heat. In brutal cold, a big diesel rolling down the highway can pull so much frozen air through its radiator that the engine never reaches proper operating temperature at all. It runs cold for hours. Cold means poor combustion, wasted fuel, a heater that barely works, and a defroster losing its fight with the windshield. The cardboard chokes off the airflow. The engine climbs to the temperature it was designed to run at, and everything downstream gets better. Your grandfather did the exact same thing to his tractor and his grain truck, and farmers in the 30s draped burlap over radiators for the same reason. The truck parts industry eventually admitted defeat and started selling fitted vinyl versions called winter fronts for $80. They do the same job as the cardboard. The cardboard was free. Number 13, the pantyhose fan belt. When a belt snaps in the middle of nowhere, the engine loses its water pump, the water pump stops moving coolant, and you have maybe a few minutes before the engine cooks itself into scrap. The old fix was a pair of pantyhose, twisted into a rope, stretched around the pulleys and tied off tight. It sounds like a joke. It is material science. Nylon has a tensile strength that rivals mild steel by weight, which is exactly why they make tow ropes and parachute cord out of it. Twisted into a cord, a pair of nylons can transmit enough rotation to spin a water pump long enough to limp into the next town. Now, an honest word here, because the men who live this deserve honesty. On a big diesel with its heavy matched V-belts, the pantyhose trick was more prayer than plan. Where it truly earned its reputation was on everything else a driver kept running: the pickup, the wife's wagon, the farm truck on the back 40. On those, it got men home more times than anybody ever counted, and plenty of old hands kept a pair behind the seat of the big truck anyway, because at 2 in the morning on a 2-lane highway, a prayer beats nothing. If a man was married, his wife already knew why her drawer kept coming up short. Nobody wrote this in a manual. It passed from cab to cab, over CB radio and coffee counters, the same way your grandfather learned that baling wire fixes almost anything for almost long enough. Number 12, rocking backward before pulling a heavy load forward. Watch an old hand start off with 80,000 pounds behind him, and you will sometimes see the truck ease backward a few inches before it goes forward. A new driver watching from across the lot thinks the man missed a gear. He didn't. Two things are happening. First, a loaded truck sitting still is held by static friction, and static friction is stronger than the friction of things already moving. Breaking everything loose in reverse means the load is already in motion when he swings forward. Second, a tractor and trailer are connected through a driveline and a fifth wheel with slack in every joint. Rocking back gathers that slack so the truck picks up the load gradually, one connection at a time, instead of snapping the full weight against the driveline all at once. Your grandfather did this with a chained up stump and a farm truck. He called it getting a run at it. Railroad engineers do the same thing on a bigger scale, backing the locomotive to compress the couplers so it starts one car at a time instead of dragging a mile of dead train at once. Before we go on, stop and look at what those first four have in common, because it is not an accident. Tension in a sidewall, heat in an engine block, friction under a drive tire, slack in a drive line, not a screen or a sensor or a warning light anywhere in sight. Just the four things your grandfather managed every single day on the farm without ever once using those words. He thumped the tractor tires. He covered the radiator in November. He kept nylon and wire behind the seat. He never yanked a load. He eased into it. The men who drove trucks in the 60s and 70s were mostly farm kids who carried that knowledge onto the interstate. The physics never changed. It just changed vehicles. And the next one might be the best piece of glove box science on this whole list. Number 11, a bar of soap rubbed into a leaking fuel tank. A rock kicks up off the blacktop, or a chunk of tire tread from somebody else's blowout, and now a saddle tank is weeping diesel down its side in a thin, shining line. The modern answer is a tow truck and a repair bill. The old answer was in the glove box next to the fuses, a plain bar of hand soap, dragged hard back and forth across the crack until the groove packed completely full. That sounds like something a kid would try. It is chemistry, and it is sound. Soap is built to dissolve in water. That is its entire job in life. But soap does not dissolve in diesel fuel, or in gasoline either, because oil and soap sit on opposite sides of the chemical fence. So the fuel washing against the inside of that crack cannot eat the plug out. The soap packs in, stiffens, and holds, and the very fuel that caused the emergency is what leaves the patch alone. The Army put this fix in its field expedient repair guidance, and your grandfather knew it for the tractor tank before the Army wrote it down. It was never a permanent repair. It was never supposed to be. It was 200 miles of repair, which is exactly the distance between a bad afternoon and a ruined week. Number 10, riding out of the ruts when it rains. Every worn highway lane has 2 shallow grooves polished into it by millions of tires. In dry weather, the ruts are fine. In rain, those grooves become 2 long, shallow rivers, and a tire riding in standing water at highway speed stops touching the road at all. That is hydroplaning, and it comes down to simple arithmetic. A tire can only push so much water out of its way per second. Past a certain depth and speed, the water cannot escape fast enough, so it lifts the tire and the tire skis. Steering a truck that is skiing does nothing. Old drivers moved over 6 inches out of the grooves up onto the crown of the lane where the water runs off sideways, and they rode the high ground like their grandfathers plowed on the ridge instead of in the furrow after a wet week. 6 inches of lane position. That is the entire trick. It has saved more trucks than any electronic system ever bolted to one. Number 9, going down the mountain in the gear that brought you up it. There is a saying that has hung in truck stop diners since before the interstate system was finished. You can go down a mountain too slow 1,000 times, but you will only go down too fast once. The physics behind it is heat. Brakes do not really stop a truck. Brakes convert motion into heat, and a brake drum can only hold so much heat before the parts expand, the linings glaze, and the pedal goes soft while the mountain keeps pulling. That is brake fade. And on a 6% grade with 40 tons pushing, fade is a death sentence. The old solution costs nothing. Drop into a low gear at the top before the descent starts and let the engine itself hold the truck back so the brakes stay cool and stay ready. The engine can shed that heat all day long. The brakes cannot. Runaway truck ramps exist on every western pass for the drivers who learned this lesson 11 seconds too late, and the men who never needed a ramp were the ones crawling down in 4th gear while tourists honked at them. Number 8, a hammer on frozen brake drums. Park a truck overnight in slush and hard cold, and the brake shoes can freeze solid to the drums. In the morning, the truck will not roll. The engine strains, the tires just skid, and the modern instinct is to force it, which tears the lining right off the shoe and ends the trip. The old fix was a ball-peen hammer and a walk around the trailer, giving each drum a few sharp raps. It looks like a man beating his truck in frustration. It is precision work. Ice is strong when you push on it slowly, but it is brittle, and a bond of ice cannot survive a shock. A hammer blow sends a jolt through the drum that the metal shrugs off, and the ice cannot, cracking the frozen bond in one hit. Your grandmother did the same thing with an ice cube tray, twisting it sharply instead of pulling slowly. Same material, same weakness, same solution. Machinists call it impact loading. Drivers called it Tuesday in North Dakota. Here's the part of this story worth sitting with for a minute. None of what you have heard so far was ever written down in the places knowledge is supposed to live. There was no course for the hammer, no certification for the soap, no manual page for the 6 inches of lane position. It moved the way knowledge moved on farms and in machine shops for 200 years, from an older man to a younger one, usually right after the younger one had just done it wrong. Then 3 generations of automatic transmissions, warning chimes, and computers that idiot-proof everything made it unnecessary to know. And the last generation that carries all of it is retiring right now. That is half the reason this channel exists. If keeping this kind of know-how alive is worth something to you, hit subscribe because there is more of it coming every week. Now, Back to the countdown because the next one sounds the most backwards of all. Number 7, cracking the window in the sleeper on a freezing night. It is 20 below outside and the old driver opens his window an inch before bed. The reason is that a sleeping human being breathes out close to a liter of water over a night. Seal the cab up tight and that moisture has nowhere to go. So it finds the coldest surfaces, the glass and the steel walls, and condenses. By morning, the windows are sheeted in ice on the inside. The bedding is damp, and damp bedding loses most of its power to hold warmth. A wet blanket pulls heat out of your body instead of keeping it in. The cracked window costs a little heat and buys a dry cab, and dry beats warm every single time in the cold. Sailors knew it in ship bunks. Your grandfather knew it in the deer camp cabin, where somebody always cracked a window no matter how hard the stove was running. The moisture has to go somewhere. You choose the window or it chooses your blankets. Number 6, floor mats and kitty litter under spinning tires. A tire spinning on ice is not weak. The engine has plenty of power. The problem is that rubber on wet ice has almost no grip to transfer that power through. And worse, a spinning tire melts the ice under it into a film of water that is slicker still. The fix is anything rough jammed into the gap. Kitty litter, sand, floor mats, cardboard, chains off the load, even gravel scooped from the shoulder. All of it does one job, giving the rubber something to bite so the power that was always there can finally reach the ground. Old drivers kept a bag of litter behind the seat all winter for exactly this, and their fathers kept a sack of sand and a shovel in the farm truck for the same reason, and their fathers put chains on wagon wheels before either of them was born. The trouble was never under the hood. It was in the handshake between the tire and the earth. Number 5, reading the grass before the wind reads you. An empty 53-foot trailer is a sail. It is 13.5 feet tall, 53 feet long, and light, and wind does not push on a sail politely. The force of wind grows with the square of its speed, so a gust at 40 miles an hour is not twice as strong as one at 20. It is 4 times as strong. Loaded, a trailer has 40,000 pounds of ballast holding it down. Empty, it has nothing. And empty trailers get blown flat onto their sides on Wyoming overpasses every single winter. The old drivers never waited for a weather alert. They read the country. Grass lying flat in the median, flags standing straight out at the truck stops, snow smoking sideways across the blacktop, tumbleweeds crossing at a dead sprint. When the grass told them the wind was working, they slowed down or shut down because a man standing still has never been blown over on an overpass. Sailors read water the same way for 3,000 years. The instrument is free and it never needs calibrating. Number 4, building speed before the hill, not on it. Watch an old-timer approach a long grade and you will see him gaining speed a full mile before the climb starts, while the new driver waits until the truck is already slowing to react. The old man is making a deposit. Speed is stored energy, kinetic energy, and a heavy truck rolling fast carries an enormous amount of it. Carry extra speed into the bottom of a grade, and the hill spends your stored energy before it ever touches your engine, so you crest higher, faster, and cheaper. Wait until the grade has already eaten your momentum and you are lugging up at 35, burning fuel to buy back what you gave away for free. Your grandfather did it with a loaded hay wagon behind a tractor that had no power to spare. He got his run at the bottom because there was no other way up. Kids do it on bicycles without being taught. The truck is just a bigger bicycle with a paycheck attached. And if you think that sounds too simple to matter, the fleet companies have the receipts. In the 2000s, they started putting recorders in trucks to study fuel economy, and the data kept embarrassing the engineers. The most efficient drivers in almost every fleet were the oldest ones, the men trained before cruise control, and the gap was not small. Same trucks, same routes, and the veterans burned meaningfully less fuel because they were managing momentum with their eyes a mile up the road while the computer could only react to the 50 feet in front of the bumper. The company studied what the old men were doing, wrote it down, and sold it back to the industry as predictive cruise control. The software is genuinely clever. It is also a digital copy of a habit your grandfather had behind a team of horses. Number 3, walking the lug nuts with your eyes. A loose wheel nut on a truck does not announce itself until the wheel leaves, and a truck wheel coming off at highway speed is 150 pounds of steel bouncing into oncoming traffic. But a loosening nut leaves evidence, and the old drivers knew how to read it. A nut that has backed off, even slightly, starts to work against the wheel, and that tiny movement grinds off fine rust and metal dust that streaks outward from the nut, like a little comet tail. Tight nuts stay clean. Loose ones leave trails. So the morning walk around included a slow look at every hub, reading the dust patterns the way a tracker reads the ground. Eventually, the industry caught up and started selling small, pointed plastic indicators that clip onto the nuts, so misalignment shows at a glance. And those indicators are a fine invention. They are also an admission, printed in yellow plastic, that the old man squinting at rust streaks in 1968 was performing the same inspection for free. Number 2, shaving cream on the inside of the windshield. Fogged glass has ended more trips than blizzards have, and the old cure came out of a shaving kit. A thin layer of cheap shaving cream wiped onto the inside of the windshield and buffed off with a dry rag keeps the glass clear for days. Fog is millions of separate microscopic droplets rather than a film of water, and each droplet scatters light, which is why you cannot see through it. Shaving cream is loaded with surfactants, soap compounds that break water's surface tension, and the invisible layer they leave behind means moisture cannot bead into droplets anymore. It flattens into a smooth, transparent sheet instead, and a sheet of water is glass you can see through. Divers spit in their masks for the same reason. Soldiers soap their eyeglasses in 2 wars. Your grandmother rubbed a cut potato on the bathroom mirror, and the starch did the same job. The chemical companies sell the identical trick in a spray bottle now for $9. The barbershop version still works. Number 1, this last one is not really a hack at all. It is the reason the other 14 work, the thing I promised you at the start. Every technique on this list is the same skill wearing 14 different hats, and that skill is managing energy before it becomes a problem. Heat in the brakes, momentum on the grade, friction under the tires, moisture in the air, tension in the belt, and the drum in the sidewall. A truck is just energy moving down a road, and the old drivers understood without a single equation that the man who manages energy early manages it cheaply, and the man who manages it late pays full price. That is why they read the road a mile ahead instead of 50 feet ahead. The gear chosen at the top of the mountain, the speed built before the grade, the cardboard hung before the cold snap, the window cracked before sleep. All of it is the same move. Handle it now, small, or handle it later, big. Your grandfather ran his farm on that principle. Your grandmother ran her kitchen on it. The men who ran the interstates in the 70s carried it in their hands and their seats, and the backs of their necks, and the engineers with the telemetry and the wind tunnel spent 40 years confirming what those men could have told them over a $2 cup of coffee. Next time an old conventional rolls past you with cardboard on the grill, understand what you are looking at. That is not a man who cannot afford a winter front. That is applied thermodynamics with a CB antenna. And one last thing before you go. If you ever stood on the shoulder of a 2-lane highway, twisting a pair of pantyhose around a pulley, the comment section below is yours, because that is the story I want to hear most of all. Short of that, tell me what your father or your grandfather kept behind the seat. Every truck had its own kit, and no two kits were ever the same. I read every one of these.